How is a porpoise different from a dolphin?
Both porpoises and dolphins are types of whales, they are closely related to one another. Porpoises are usually smaller, 4 to 6 feet, about 1 to 2 meters long, while dolphins average about 8 feet, 2.4 meters, in length. The snout of a porpoise is more rounded, and its teeth are flatter. A dolphin has a long snout and cone-shaped teeth. Dolphins have long been studied for their intelligence, they are very fast learners. For the enormous variety of sounds that they make to communicate, whistles, clicks, and squeaks, and for the tender way that they care for one another and sometimes for human beings. There have been many reports of dolphins saving the lives of people who were drowning or divers who were lost. The most familiar dolphin species is the bottlenose dolphin. Most dolphins in aquariums are this type. Like many dolphins, this animal is graceful and very playful. Its snout gives the impression that the dolphin is smiling when its mouth is open. They can often be spotted on the open sea, following ships and playfully leaping out of the water.
What are some of the smallest animals in the world?
Some people consider protozoa, which are a type of single-celled organisms including amoebas, part of the animal kingdom. According to that classification, the microscopic protozoa would be the smallest animals. But many classification systems place protozoa in their own kingdom called Protista, a group separate from the animal kingdom. Several types of insects are nearly microscopic, measuring only a fraction of a millimeter in length. The smallest mammals are considerably larger than that, Commerson's dolphin, weighing around 50 to 70 pounds, 23 to 32 kilograms, is the smallest sea mammal. A bat that is about the same size as a bumblebee, called Kitty's hog-nosed bat, may be the smallest land mammal. It is only about an inch long, 29 to 33 millimeters, and weighs around 0.07 ounces, 2 grams.
How long ago did dinosaurs live?
Dinosaurs first appeared about 230 million years ago, during the Triassic period. Their large size and vast numbers meant that they dominated animal life on Earth for millions of years. Dinosaurs became extinct around 65 million years ago, at the end of the Cretaceous period. The earliest human beings lived about 2 million years ago. Millions of years after the last dinosaur had died. Earth was much different when dinosaurs roamed the planet. Several 100 million years ago, instead of there being 7 continents or large land masses, there was just one giant mass of land that was surrounded by ocean. This land mass gradually broke apart into separate continents. Areas that are now covered with tall buildings or mountain ranges were once beneath the sea. And scientists believe the climate was fairly warm throughout the year. By the end of the era in which dinosaurs lived, temperatures had cooled and distinct seasons had developed.
Why is grass often wet in the morning even though it hasn't rained?
Floating water molecules, or water vapor, are always present in the air. The warmer the air is, the more water vapor it can hold. When air cools, it reaches a temperature at which it cannot continue to hold its moisture. This temperature is called the dew point. At this temperature, water vapor will condense, becoming a liquid. At night, without the warmth of the sun, the temperature of the ground and the grass that covers it becomes cooler. If it becomes cooler than the dew point of the air that touches it, condensation will occur. The grass will be covered with droplets of water by morning, even though no rain has fallen during the night. This moisture on the grass is called dew, and it often evaporates in the morning sunlight before we get to see it. If the temperature at night drops to below freezing, the dew will become frost. The same thing happens when the glass filled with a cold drink sweats on a warm summer day, or when your eyeglasses fog up as you come indoors from the cold.
Why are rainforests so important to the health of our planet?
In 1800 there were 7.1 billion acres of rainforest in the world. Now, just 200 years later, less than half 3.5 billion acres remain. Over 100,000 acres of the world's rainforests are destroyed each day, with trees cut down for their valuable wood and land cleared for farming. While covering just 2% of Earth's surface, the dense vegetation of these forests plays an important role in the health of our planet. The destruction of rainforests threatens the health of our planet by reducing the amount of oxygen in our air and increasing carbon dioxide. Too much carbon dioxide in our atmosphere keeps the sun's heat from radiating back into space, increasing global temperatures, called the greenhouse effect. Global warming, in turn, could bring about major climate changes. Melting glaciers and rising sea levels, for example, could cause flooding of coastal regions. The plants in rainforests produce natural chemicals that fight off destruction by insects. And scientists have learned how to make plant-based insecticides from rainforest plants, without destroying the rainforests, to spray on crops. These natural insecticides are far less toxic than synthetic, or human-made, chemicals. Numerous medicines, as much as 1/4 of all prescription drugs, have been made from materials gathered in rainforests. And many more life-saving medicines may await discovery there. Many products like natural rubber, essential oils used in cosmetics and perfumes, and rattan A material weaved together to make furniture can be taken from rainforests without causing widespread destruction. In addition, rainforests can absorb huge amounts of water. When rainforests are destroyed, the vast amounts of rainfall in those regions cannot be absorbed, resulting in widespread flooding. Fortunately, international efforts have begun trying to save what remains of the rainforests by helping the people who destroy them find other ways to earn a living. Still, the destruction of these important forests continues at a rapid pace.
What is a volcano?
A volcano is a natural opening in Earth's crust through which hot molten, or melted rock, known as lava, as well as gases, steam, and ash. What remains after solid material is completely burned, escapes, often in a big, noisy eruption or explosion. These eruptions are thought to act like safety valves, relieving the enormous heat and pressure that exist deep in Earth's interior. A volcano is usually a cone-shaped mountain, its sides built up from solidified lava and ash, that has a hole or crater in its center through which it vents. There are several different kinds or stages of eruptions, many causing no damage to the places or people located near the volcano. But a few eruptions are huge and destructive. During these, lava can pour out and run down the volcano into surrounding areas, and enormous suffocating clouds of steam, ash, hot gases, and shooting rock can travel downhill at great speeds, covering many miles. When Washington's Mount St. Helens exploded in 1980, for instance, such volcanic clouds killed millions of trees. One of the most famous and destructive volcanic eruptions occurred in AD 79, when Mount Vesuvius in what is now Italy erupted, destroying the important Roman city of Pompeii. The great cloud of cinder and ash that covered the city preserved it remarkably. And much has been learned about ancient Roman times by studying these amazing ruins. Mt. Vesuvius is still an active volcano, which means that volcanic activity still occurs there and eruptions happen from time to time. A volcano may also be described as dormant, which means that no activity has occurred for a long while, but conditions still exist for an eruption to take place in the future. An extinct volcano is one that will never erupt again. Many volcanoes occur near the area where two ridges or plates of Earth's crust meet. Circling the Pacific Ocean where crust plates meet is a group of volcanoes known as the Ring of Fire. Plate movement in such regions may allow liquid rock, called magma, that is located in chambers in Earth's interior to rise, resulting in volcanic activity. Such conditions often result in earthquakes as well. Volcanic activity can take place under the ocean as well as on land. And when this happens, the formation of islands sometimes results. The Hawaiian Islands were created by just such volcanic activity some 40 million years ago. Even today, two of the world's most active volcanoes, Mauna Loa and Kilauea, are located on the island of Hawaii. Visitors to Hawaii's volcanoes. National Park can travel to the slopes that surround the great volcanoes.
How does a camera take pictures?
When you press the picture-taking button on a camera, you open the shutter and let light inside for a fraction of a second. The light passes through a lens that focuses it on film, leaving a record there of what the camera saw during that button pressing instant. The film is coated with light-sensitive chemicals that save the impression, but it usually has to be placed into a bath of other chemicals to make an image appear and remain permanently. The film is developed into negatives, on which appear images that look very different than those that were photographed. Dark shades appear light. Light shades appear dark, and colors are the opposite of what they should be. But when light passes through these negatives onto special photo paper, which is also developed using chemicals, the images that appear are normal again, exact copies of the photographed scenes. With instant cameras, developing chemicals are contained inside, treating the film right away. A picture pops out on photo paper, its image forming while you wait.
How did we get the United States national anthem?
In September 1814, the United States and Great Britain were in the midst of fighting what is known as the War of 1812. The British had taken over Washington, D.C., and planned to attack Baltimore, Maryland. A few American citizens, including a lawyer and poet named Francis Scott Key, approached the British fleet, which was anchored in Chesapeake Bay, to request the release of an American who had been taken prisoner. The British agreed to let the prisoner and the others return to American shores. But their return had to wait until the British were done attacking Fort McHenry, which was defending Baltimore. Throughout the night of September 13th to 14th, Key heard the explosions of the battle, anxiously awaiting morning to see whether the Americans had won the battle. In the early morning light, Key could see that Fort McHenry's enormous American flag was still waving, indicating that the Americans had been triumphant. Relieved and inspired by the sight, Key composed a poem called Defense of Fort McHenry.
Why do most cereals make crackling noises when you pour milk on them?
Most cereals are made by baking grain mixtures, made from rice, corn, wheat, or oats, that have been formed into bite-sized pieces. During the baking process, these pieces expand, causing tiny holes or cavities to form on their surfaces. When milk is poured onto cereal, it flows over these holes and traps air inside. As the milk starts to soak into the cereal, it forces the air out and fills up the tiny holes. So, The crackling noise you hear coming from your bowl is actually air being released from your cereal.
What does alcohol do?
A short while after a person takes a drink of beer, wine, or liquor, the alcohol in that drink will be absorbed into the bloodstream and transported to the brain and the rest of the body. The rate at which that happens depends on the person's size. The concentration of alcohol in the drinks, and how much food is in his or her stomach. Alcohol interferes with the messages normally passed from nerve cells to the rest of the body. A drunk person can't hear, see, smell, taste, or feel as well as a sober person, and drunk people are less sensitive to pain. Alcohol is a depressant, which means it slows down brain function. That slowing gives people a relaxed feeling. But it also means that the senses are dulled and reaction time is slower. With alcohol in their blood, people are less coordinated and lose some control over their muscles. Many drunk people have trouble walking without staggering. A particularly dangerous effect of alcohol is the resulting lack of inhibitions, or inner restrictions over behavior. While most people wouldn't drive into oncoming traffic while sober, it might seem like a fun thing to do when drunk. People are more likely to get into fights, drive dangerously, and generally put themselves into risky situations when they are drunk. And because alcohol is a depressant, it will only increase the feelings of sadness or loneliness that drive some people to drink in the first place. For people under the legal drinking age, 21 in the United States, alcohol can also cause problems with the police. Anyone under age 21 caught with alcohol or under the influence of alcohol can face legal penalties.
Why do flamingos' knees bend the other way?
If you've seen flamingos, and some other long-legged birds, like cranes, you've probably noticed that when they walk, their legs bend in the opposite direction of human legs.
Why are some people blind?
Blindness is complete loss of sight. It can happen when certain parts of the eyeballs, the optic nerves, which carry visual signals from the eyes to the brain, or the sight centers of the brain are damaged. Such damage can occur as a result of injuries or diseases. A person can also be born with eye or brain abnormalities that cause blindness. In many cases, particularly in very poor countries, infectious diseases and poor diets can also cause blindness. A lack of vitamin A, in fact, is the leading cause of blindness worldwide. With basic medicines and proper nutrition, such cases could be prevented. For every one person in the United States who is totally blind, there are 4 others who are visually impaired or legally blind. These people have some ability to see, but they see so poorly even with eyeglasses that they cannot do things that require good vision, like driving a car.
Will people be cloned someday?
The breakthroughs in cloning technology made by the Rosslyn scientists and several other scientists since then who have successfully cloned mice, monkeys, and cows have raised new hopes, and fears, that the technology to clone a human being is within reach. Some scientists believe that the first successful cloning of a human being will happen before the end of this century's first decade. The method to clone a human will most likely be the same as that used to clone Dolly the sheep. The cloning of mammals and the possibility of cloning a person has sparked many arguments about whether it's right or wrong to conduct such experiments. While some argue that cloning can yield tremendous benefits, others worry that the technology is ripe for abuse. Many politicians and scientists have called for a worldwide ban on human cloning until further research can be conducted. Some countries have agreed and instituted such a ban.
How does my voice work?
Your vocal cords are stretched flaps of tissue located in your voice box, or larynx, which sits at the top of your windpipe or trachea. Your voice box is located in your throat, and if you put your fingers on it while you talk or sing, you can feel it humming. When air from your lungs passes over your vocal cords, they vibrate. Surrounding muscles open and close and stretch the vocal cords, changing their vibrations to produce a variety of sounds. The more stretched your vocal cords, the more rapidly they vibrate and the higher the sounds they make. Sounds made in your voice box are further changed when they are shaped by your throat, tongue, cheeks, and lips, and even teeth, into speech or song.
What do the patches on the uniforms of soldiers mean?
For as long as there have been large armies, the personnel of those armies have been divided into various ranks. For such organizations to work effectively, some people have to be in charge and others have to follow their orders. One way to quickly determine who is in charge is to look at the differences in uniform, particularly the patches and other ornaments on sleeves and shoulders. The patches on a soldier's uniform tell his or her rank, reflecting the importance of that person's position in the armed services. A beginning soldier might have a patch with a single stripe. As a soldier gains experience and earns promotions, the number of stripes will increase. A symbol that reveals to other soldiers his or her advanced rank. The uniforms of military officers have metal bars, stars, or eagles, depending on the branch of the military. Some enlisted personnel, people who aren't officers, wear chevrons, or stripes in an upside-down V shape. Some of the medals and patches on a soldier's uniform also symbolize accomplishments, with medals honoring acts of bravery and outstanding service.
When did the 21st century begin?
As the end of the year 1999 approached, people all over the world began preparing for huge celebrations. To mark the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st. This changeover was particularly significant as it also began a new millennium, or 1,000-year period. Many people pointed out, however, that the new century and the new millennium would begin not on January 1, 2000, but on January 1, 2001. The first year of the Christian era was not the year 0. It was the year 1 AD. Therefore, the first century, or 100-year period, ended at the beginning of the year 101. Fast forward 20 more centuries, and the 21st century, and the third millennium officially began on January 1, 2001. That information didn't stop people from throwing gigantic parties on December 31, 1999. It just meant that the following year could provide an additional excuse for gala celebrations.
How do oysters make pearls?
Pearls are round, iridescent jewels strung together to make necklaces or bracelets, or mounted onto earrings or rings. Unlike most kinds of jewelry that are made from stones or metals, pearls come from living creatures. They are produced by oysters, and, in rare cases, by some other mollusks. The mantle, the part of a mollusk that secretes the substance that becomes the shell, also produces the smooth, shiny nacre, referred to as mother of pearl, found on the shell's inner layers. If an irritating substance like a grain of sand finds its way into the mantle will start secreting nacre to cover up that irritant. Layer upon layer of nacre builds up until eventually a pearl is formed. The pearls with the roundest, smoothest shape are the most expensive. Most pearls that we see are a creamy, off-white color, but they can be several different colors. Some oysters in the South Pacific produce black pearls. People can create conditions that encourage oysters to produce pearls. Pearl harvesters make a small cut in the oyster's mantle and insert an irritating substance. Then they sit back and wait for a pearl to form. The pearls that result from this process are called cultivated pearls, while those that occur without human involvement are called natural pearls. It can take 3 years or more for a pearl, whether natural or cultivated, to form.
Why should I wash my hands after I go to the bathroom?
Feces contain a lot of bacteria. Once solid waste exits the body, it attracts more bacteria, which use it as nourishment to grow and multiply. While some types of bacteria are harmless, other kinds can cause infections and other problems. When you wipe yourself after going to the bathroom, you may get invisible traces of waste on your hands and transfer the bacteria in it to other parts of your body or to objects that others may touch. But this problem can be eliminated by a good hand washing with warm water and soap, for about 2 minutes. Because we live closely with one another, it is important to follow rules of cleanliness or hygiene, to protect our own health and the health of others.
Why isn't there school during the summer?
Our 10-month school year from September through June developed when most people still lived and worked on farms. Parents needed their children to help out at home during the growing season, so there was no school in the summer. The 10-month school year became a tradition. Even now, when most people no longer live and work on farms, the traditional school year has remained, and other traditions were built around it. A summer vacation from school became a tradition, too, allowing children to go on special trips with their families. The summer tourist industry depended on family vacationers in order to make money, and on students to do the work with summer jobs. But studies have shown that the 2 to 3 months that children have off in the summer can cause problems. A lot of learning is forgotten over the long summer, and a lot of time is wasted relearning it during review time when school begins in the fall. Because our society is no longer an agricultural one, and because almost all institutions operate throughout the year, many educators have been looking into the idea of year-round schools. There are about 2,700 year-round schools in the United States today, and studies show that most of their students learn more than those who attend traditional schools. Continuous education appears to be better than interrupted education. Children at most year-round schools attend the same number of days 180 as children at regular schools. But instead of a long summer break, they have shorter, more frequent breaks throughout the year. These breaks, called intersessions, are often used by students who need extra help or who want to learn more about things that especially interest them. The number of year-round schools is growing, which may indicate the start of a new tradition.
How did clothing develop?
People first started wearing clothing to keep warm and dry and to protect themselves against the blazing sun. scratching plants, and attacking animals. Early men and women used animal furs as clothing, wrapping them around their waists and shoulders. But since ancient times, clothing has also been a means of expression. A way in which people have let others know more about themselves. Even in prehistoric times, people used dress to indicate which group they belonged to, their status or position within their group or tribe, and as an expression of their customs and religious beliefs. Early men and women used strings of beads or stones, feathers, and other ornaments to make themselves look special and different from one another. Early on, people found that by scraping animal hides and treating them with fats, they could make them softer and more flexible. This allowed the skins to be cut, sewn, and shaped into better fitting clothing. Thin strips of leather drawn through holes in the hides kept the pieces together. Finer sewing could be done once sharp needles that could pierce the skins were developed. Starting about 50,000 years ago, these were usually carved from wood or bone. Then people began to make cloth. Cloth is material made from threads that are woven together in a crisscross pattern. About 10,000 years ago, people first made cloth out of animal hair that was spun into thread. When the short hairs of an animal were overlapped and twisted together, long strands could be made, which were then woven into fabric. People in ancient Asia used the hair of sheep, camels, and goats to make cloth. In other parts of the world, people used the hairs of different animals, of mountain creatures like llamas and alpacas in South America, and of horses, buffalo, and moose in North America to make their cloth. And it could be colored by using dyes made from certain plants and even animals. In ancient Greece, for example, a rich red dye was made from the skin of the tiny Kermes worm. Ancient Egyptians were some of the first people to make cloth. Beginning around 5000 BC. Instead of using animal hair, the Egyptians wove together the long fibers of flax plants to make lightweight linen, perfect for their desert climate. Historians think that they got the idea for weaving from fishermen, who made nets by tying threads together in a special way with weights attached to their ends to keep them tight, straight, and free from tangling. As centuries passed, clothing continued to be used to express the identity and status of its wearer. The clothes of farmers and tradespeople like blacksmiths and carpenters, for example, remained simple and sturdy. Meant to last a long time, their clothing styles were also loose, making them easy to work in. But wealthy people could afford fine fabrics from faraway places. And they had the luxury of thinking about the way their outfits were shaped and decorated. They could show their higher social status by wearing clothing styles that were sometimes wildly impractical, things that would never be worn by someone who performed manual labor for a living. In the 14th century, for instance, long pointed shoes were in fashion. Some with 20-inch toes that had to be stuffed with moss to keep their shape. A farmer certainly couldn't work in his fields in shoes like that. Immense hanging sleeves and corsets that pinched waists in to make them smaller worn. by both men and women are other examples of impractical and uncomfortable fashions.
What is the difference between a fruit and a vegetable?
A fruit is the part of a plant that has developed from a flower and contains seeds. Fruits are generally fleshy, sweet, juicy, and colorful. Scientists think that fruits developed in order to spread seeds. Fruits attract hungry animals, who carry the swallowed seeds in their digestive systems until they expel them in waste. Far from the plants on which the fruits grew. Many of the plant foods that we think of as vegetables because they are not particularly sweet are really fruits, because they contain seeds. Tomatoes, peppers, pumpkins, and even nuts are all technically fruits. Fruits are divided into 4 types: fruits with seeds embedded in their flesh. Like oranges and watermelons, fruits with pits or stones inside, like cherries or peaches, fruits with seeds in a central core. Like apples and pears, and dry fruits, like nuts, grains, beans, and peas. Dry fruits are the seeds themselves. You can eat sweet peas or fava beans. Or you can plant them in the ground to grow more. Vegetables are simply other parts of plants that are eaten, like roots, stems, and leaves. Carrots and sweet potatoes are roots. Asparagus is a stem. Cabbage and spinach are leaves. Eating fruits and vegetables provides us with valuable vitamins and minerals.
How do penguins keep their eggs warm?
Some penguins lay their eggs in nests like other birds. The emperor and king penguins, however, have an unusual method of keeping their eggs warm. While the female makes a long trek from the penguin colony to the water in search of food, the male places the egg on top of his feet, where it can nestle up against his warm body. For this entire incubation period, the male penguin carefully balances the egg on his feet, living off stored fat while he is unable to go find food. When a storm hits, all of the male penguins huddle together into a circle to provide some protection from high winds. After the egg hatches, the parent must continue holding it on its feet because the baby doesn't have enough insulating feathers, or down, to keep it warm on its own. When it's old enough, the baby penguin joins a large group of other babies. A few adults stand guard over the little ones while their parents seek food. When the parents return to the colony, they call to their chick. The parents can recognize their baby among the dozens of others by its appearance and its distinctive voice.
How is a seal different from a sea lion?
Sea lions are just one of many different types of seals. Seals, along with walruses, are classified as pinnipeds, a Latin word meaning fin-footed. As the name suggests, seals' limbs are flippers, they have one pair in front, and one pair in back. Seals are divided into two categories, earless, or true, seals, which have tiny ear holes but no external flaps. And eared seals, so named because they have small ear flaps on their heads. Earless seals include the gray seal, harp seal, and the huge elephant seal, which can reach a length of 21 feet, 6.5 meters, and weigh 7,780 pounds, 3,530 kilograms. Sea lions and fur seals are eared seals. There are several differences, in addition to the ears, between sea lions and their earless seal relatives. The sea lion's flippers are longer than those of earless seals. They look like wings and usually don't have hair on them, while seals' flippers are covered with hair. Sea lions can turn their hind flippers forward, allowing them to use all of their limbs when moving on land. Seals cannot turn their hind flippers forward, and in order to move on land they slide on their bellies and pull with their front flippers, moving in much the same way as a caterpillar.
Why do some animals carry their young around in pouches?
Some mammals, like kangaroos, koalas, and possums, are called marsupials. When marsupial babies are born, they are incompletely developed. They continue developing outside the womb, in many cases living for a time in a pouch. A large fold of skin called a marsupium, on the mother's body. The marsupium keeps the developing baby warm and close to the mother's nipples, where it can feed around the clock on the milk the mother produces. Most marsupial species are found in and around Australia, but several species, including the opossum, can be found in North and South America.
Why did soldiers once wear armor?
Since ancient times, soldiers have worn special clothing or armor to protect themselves during warfare. Hard materials like leather, wood, shells, and even woven reeds were used to give soldiers extra protection against enemy arrows. Metal started to be used for armor about 3,500 years ago, by warriors in the Middle East. By the time of the ancient Greeks. About 1,000 years later, soldiers were well protected, wearing large pieces of metal on their chests and backs, shin guards, and metal helmets, and they carried metal shields. Soon armored clothing, garments with metal strips and plates attached, began to be made for soldiers. Then chain mail, a type of metal cloth, was developed. Made of small metal rings linked together, chainmail was much more flexible than metal plates, but could not withstand the force of larger weapons, like lances. So full suits of armor made of steel plates, hinged at the knees and the elbows, came into use around the 14th century. Soldiers were covered with steel from head to toe, with heavy metal helmets covering their faces, heads, and necks. A warrior could see and breathe through small slits or openings in the helmet's visor. A movable metal flap that could be lifted up. Only important or wealthy warriors could afford this kind of elaborate armor. Suits of armor weighed so much that the soldiers or knights who wore them usually couldn't move around in them very well. They wore such armor mostly when they fought on horseback. Even the horses sometimes wore armor. As the methods and weapons of warfare changed, clumsy personal armor was no longer useful. It became far more important for soldiers to be able to move quickly and easily. Today's soldiers usually wear cloth uniforms and steel helmets. But armor is used on war vehicles like tanks, naval vessels, and aircraft. The bulletproof vests that police officers use are also a type of armor.
What is quicksand?
Quicksand is regular sand into which water is forced from below. Usually an underground spring supplies the water that pushes up into a deposit of sand. The extra water makes it so the sand particles don't hold together as well, and they become unstable to walk on. Quicksand is like a thick soup of sand and water. It isn't as watery as a puddle but isn't as firm as regular sand either. A large person or animal that strays into quicksand, which often looks deceptively dry on top, can sink quickly, even disappearing under its surface. Deposits of quicksand are rare, and they usually aren't very deep. If you do find yourself sinking into the muck, try to hold on to something solid and pull yourself out. Or lie on your back with your arms out as if you were floating in water and wait for rescuers to come. It's easy enough to float in quicksand if you stay fairly still. Struggling to get out, on the other hand, only makes you sink faster.
What is my belly button?
Your belly button, or navel, is a scar where your umbilical cord once was. The tube-like cord connected you to your mother when you were inside her uterus, growing into a baby. It carried oxygen and nourishment to you from the placenta, an organ that develops in the uterus during pregnancy, connecting you to your mother's blood supply. It also carried away waste products from your blood. Once you were born, the umbilical cord was no longer needed, because you began to breathe and eat on your own. The cord was clamped off and cut, and what was left of it withered and dropped off about a week after your birth.
Why are people right-handed or left-handed?
The way your brain works determines whether you are right or left-handed. The left half of your brain controls the right side of your body. And the right side of your brain controls the left side of your body. Because one side of the brain is always stronger or more dominant. There is one side of the body that is more developed and skilled, too. For most people, about 90%, more females than males. It is the left side of the brain that is dominant, making them right-handed, and right-footed, too. Scientists don't know why the brains of left-handed people develop in a reverse way. But it makes absolutely no difference. In fact, because left-handed people have to get along in a right-handed world, using tools, machines, and instruments designed for right-handers, they are often pretty skilled with their non-dominant hand, too. Scientists think that may be why left-handed baseball players are better hitters than those who are right-handed. There are also a few people who are ambidextrous, which means that they can do a task equally well with either hand. And some people are mixed-handed, performing some tasks better with the left hand and some with the right.
Why are flowers brightly colored?
To accomplish reproduction through cross-pollination. Flowering plants must rely on other forces, as they can't move themselves. Many flowering plants depend on insects and birds to carry their pollen from one plant to the next. And these plants can attract particular animals with brightly colored or fragrant flowers. The nutritious pollen and nectar in flowers is an important part of many creatures' diets. When insects and birds visit a flower to feed, sticky pollen grains cling to their bodies. As the creatures continue to feed from flowers of other plants of the same species, they leave some of the pollen behind, and cross-pollination occurs. Many flowering plants like grasses and several kinds of trees rely on wind for pollination. This method is less reliable than the animal carrier method of cross-pollination. So wind-pollinated plants produce huge amounts of pollen grains to improve their chances of success. The large amounts of fine, dry pollen in the air are the cause of the allergies that we call hay fever. The flowers of wind-pollinated plants are usually small, plain, and not brightly colored, and many don't produce nectar. Because they don't need to attract the attention of insects or other animals to help spread their pollen.
How do cat years compare with human years?
The formula to figure out the age of a cat in human years goes like this. At 1 year old a cat has the equivalent of 20 human years, and each additional year counts as another 4. The average lifespan of a house cat is between 12 and 14 years, which equals between 64 and 72 human years.
How does it work?
It seems very mysterious, but the answer is actually pretty simple. The curved inner chambers of the shell are just bouncing back into your ear. The noises that are around you all the time but that you don't usually notice. The louder it is around you if you're near a construction site or at a party. For example, the louder the ocean sound in the shell will be. If you don't have a conch shell handy to test this out, don't worry. You can use a cup or even your curved hand to demonstrate. Shells of different sizes and shapes will reflect noises in varying ways. And so will different kinds of cups. Try holding a large plastic cup over your ear, pull it back a bit and see how the noise changes. Then try it with a coffee cup to see if it's different.
What is the purpose of dreaming?
While scientists aren't sure, they know that people who are prevented from dreaming, people whose sleep is interrupted, become crabby, slow thinking, and clumsy. So it is clear that dreams are needed to keep the brain healthy for some of its complex functions, like memory and concentration. Many psychologists and psychiatrists, professionals who study mental and emotional behavior, believe that dreams provide us with ways of working through fears and anxieties. These professionals often analyze their patients' dreams to figure out what might be troubling them. Our dreams often feature people we know and events that recently happened in our lives. Though dreams are frequently so strange and unreal that it's hard to recognize the familiar in them.
How do people get around in cities?
Because there are so many people gathered in such a limited area in a city. Residents frequently use public or mass transportation like buses, trolleys, and trains. If all the people in a city drove their own cars, the streets would be impossibly congested. There would never be enough parking spaces, and the pollution from car exhaust would be unbearable. With mass transportation, large numbers of passengers share the same vehicle, which is kept in constant use throughout the day. Buses and trains can move more people from one place to another using less energy and producing less pollution than if private cars were used. Because mass transit vehicles usually travel set routes, they require less land space than cars. And subway trains are ultimate space savers, because they travel in tunnels underground. These electric railways are usually quick-moving as they don't have to contend with other traffic. Passengers get on and off at underground stations that connect to streets above. Actually, a lot of activities take place below the ground in cities, because surface space is so limited. While mass transportation has many advantages, it can also be somewhat inconvenient. Because buses and subways travel set routes, they usually can't drop passengers off directly at their destinations. People also have to make travel plans that fit the schedules of the vehicles. So some people in cities do own and drive cars. And because space is so limited, usually pay to keep them in long-term parking spots when they're not in use. And even when car owners drive to places in the city and park temporarily, they almost always have to pay a fee. Taxicabs, however, offer the convenience of a car without the expensive care. People can hire cabs to take them directly to their destinations. Passengers pay according to the distance traveled, which is measured by a taxi meter. Taxicabs are similar to mass transit vehicles because they are in constant use throughout the day, moving many people from one place to another. The cheapest and most environmentally friendly way to get around a city. And the best way to see its sights, is to walk.
How can mammals that live in the water sleep?
Some marine mammals, like seals, climb out of the water to sleep. Others, like whales, cannot leave the water. For one thing, they cannot move on land. And for another, a large whale's body weight would crush its lungs if it were stuck on land. Therefore, many of these animals must sleep while in the water. But they also need to be alert enough to rise to the surface every so often to get a breath of air. Human beings, and many other animals, have an involuntary breathing system, which means that we continue to breathe even when we are sleeping and not conscious of doing so. Scientists suspect that whales and dolphins have voluntary breathing, which means they have to be somewhat alert to bring their blowholes to the surface and open and close them, in order to rest and yet still be conscious enough to breathe. Marine mammals must sleep lightly, many doing so while swimming slowly near the water's surface. When bottlenose dolphins sleep, half of their brain rests while the other half remains alert, and one eye stays open, to detect food or danger signs in the water. After a couple hours, it switches, with the other half resting and the first half staying awake. Sea cows and manatees, which usually live in warm, shallow water, float at the surface when they are resting. If the water is shallow enough, they can rest their bodies on the ocean bottom and keep their heads above water.
What is the equator?
The equator is the imaginary line that circles Earth at its widest part around its middle at an equal distance from both the North and South poles. It is 24,830 miles, 39,952 kilometers, long and runs east and west, separating the northern and southern hemispheres of Earth. On maps, the equator is given the coordinate 0 degrees latitude, the starting point from which all other latitudes are figured. Latitude tells how far north or south a place is located on the globe. Latitude is used along with longitude, which tells how far east or west a place is located in relation to an imaginary line that runs north and south. the prime meridian to map the exact location of any place on Earth. Because of Earth's round shape, the equator is the part of the world that is always closest to the sun, receiving its rays most directly. In other regions, sunlight hits Earth at an angle, and the additional amount of atmosphere through which it travels absorbs more heat, leading to milder climates. The weather is usually very warm around the equator, regions collectively known as the tropics.
Why do plants sometimes wilt in the sun?
In order to take in and get rid of the gases carbon dioxide and oxygen involved in food production, plants have thousands of microscopic openings called stomata on their leaves and stems. Most of the stomata are located on the underside of leaves. A leaf on a cucumber plant has 60,000 stomata in just over 1/10 of a square inch. 1 square centimeter. Water that circulates throughout a plant escapes through these many openings in a process called transpiration. Usually a plant takes up more water through its roots than it loses through its leaves, and it is able to keep its firm shape. But on a hot, dry, or windy day, a plant can lose a lot of water through its leaves at a much faster rate than it can take it in. On such days, wilting can occur. Water pressure in plant cells helps give plants their form. Without that pressure, the cells shrink, causing a plant to wilt. At night, when there is no sunlight for photosynthesis, the stomata on plants are closed by special guard cells that surround their openings. Little transpiration occurs then, and a plant can refill its supply of water through its roots. Water pressure will return to normal in plant cells, then, along with the normal shape and appearance of the plant.
Are bats blind?
The expression blind as a bat would indicate that bats are blind. But in fact scientists believe they have fairly good eyesight. Bats are nocturnal creatures, coming out after dark to find insects and other food. Some bats, just like humans, can't see very well in the dark. But they make up for this with a unique navigating system called echolocation. These bats make a series of high-pitched sounds, frequently above the hearing range of humans, that bounce off nearby objects, like rocks, trees, or insects. The echoes of these sounds, when they reach the bat's highly sensitive ears, tell the bat where the object is and even, in the case of insects and other animals, what direction it is moving in.
What is the world's highest waterfall?
It isn't easy to measure the height of waterfalls because they usually descend in a series of falls instead of in one big drop. The world's highest waterfall, Angel Falls, named after the man who discovered it, is located in Venezuela, on the Carao River. It has the largest single drop of any waterfall at 2,648 feet, 807 meters. The total height of Angel Falls is 3,212 feet, 979 meters. You can see North America's highest waterfall, Yosemite Falls, 2,425 feet, or 739 meters, when you visit Yosemite National Park in California.
Are all dolphins mammals?
When we refer to dolphins, we usually mean the mammals that are in the same family with whales and porpoises. But there are some types of fish that are also referred to as dolphins. One that is known as mahi-mahi or dorado, and another called pompano dolphin. These fish, popular in sport fishing and as food, do not resemble the mammalian dolphins.
How can you tell if a mushroom is poisonous?
Many types of mushrooms are good to eat. The fruiting bodies of other fungi like truffles and puffballs are also tasty. But there are many mushrooms that are poisonous, and it is very hard to tell the harmful from the harmless. So you should never pick and eat a mushroom. Only an expert, who has studied the different types, can tell the difference for sure. People have been eating mushrooms for thousands of years, because they contain some protein and minerals. They were an important source of food at times when fruits and vegetables were not available. Now they are grown commercially, like other food crops.
Why does some gas smell worse than others?
The gas expelled from our intestines actually contains many different kinds of gases, including nitrogen, hydrogen sulfide, and methane. When high concentrations of the sulfur-containing gas hydrogen sulfide are present, your gas has a particularly strong odor. Certain foods, like beans, cabbage, and eggs, contain a lot of sulfur and can result in this smelly gas.
What is a cloud?
Our atmosphere is filled with floating water molecules, or water vapor. This moisture comes from Earth's bodies of water and damp soil. The heat of the sun evaporates, or turns into vapor, that moisture, and the water vapor rises. When this vapor cools, it condenses on microscopic dust and other floating particles and turns into droplets. Groups of these droplets, trillions of them, form clouds, which hang suspended in the air. These cloud droplets are so small it takes 1 million of them to form a single raindrop. When rain or snow falls to the ground from clouds, most of it eventually ends up back in oceans, lakes, and rivers, where it can again be evaporated by the heat of the sun, starting the process all over again.
What causes people to pass gas?
When there is too much air in your digestive system, there are two ways to get rid of it. It can exit from the top, through your mouth, in the form of a burp. Or it can exit from the bottom, through your anus, in the form of passed gas, better known as a fart. Some of the gas in your digestive system comes from the air you swallow when you eat, while some of it is a natural byproduct of food digestion in your large intestine. When your intestine encounters foods that are difficult to digest, including greasy or high-fat foods, it produces more gas than with foods that are digested easily. This gas travels through your intestine to your rectum and eventually passes out through your anus. While some may not like to admit it, everyone passes gas several times a day.
Which bird lays the largest eggs?
The largest eggs, not surprisingly, are laid by the largest bird, which is the ostrich. An ostrich egg averages around 6 inches, 150 millimeters in length and around 5 inches, 125 millimeters, in diameter. It weighs about 3 pounds, 1.35 kilograms. A male ostrich mates with several females during one mating season. And all of those females lay their eggs in one large nest, which can contain several dozen eggs at one time. Over the course of the 40 days it takes the eggs to hatch. The male sits on the nest at night, and the females take turns during the day.